one. We're live.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. I am your host, David Streggy, and this time I'm your real host. But today we are going to go on about a film that is very dear and near to my heart, at least when I was a kid and even growing into an adult. Maybe because it's based on a true story. Maybe I believe that the film is kind of an interesting exploration about a young kid that has been stuck with a disease and how he deals with it in life. So, I wanted to say something before we begin with first impressions and summary, is that before this film even began, back in 1973, his parents published his short film, Chris Millard's short film called a short story called The Four Diamonds. But also around the same time, they put together a foundation for cancer called the Four Diamonds Fund, and it still is around to this day, which is amazing that it has survived since, like, then. But let me go into a little bit of a summary of the film. See what IMDb says about the film, shall we? So young Christopher Millard fantasizes about being a squire of the Round Table and studies the stars. But when his difficult breathing turns out to be caused by a tumor, his fantasies turn into a means to battle the disease. Chemotherapy eats his summer, and instead of writing the standard, what I did during my summer vacation, his teacher lets him write a fictional story. And Chris makes characters from the people around him. As Chris battles with doctors, treatments, and illness, Squire Millard goes on a quest against an evil sorceress to gain the four diamonds of courage, wisdom, honesty, and strength, qualities that Chris himself attains as his health fails. So, going with first impressions, I'm going to start with you, Forrest. Why don't you tell us was this a first time watch for you, and what did you think of the film?
Yeah, I grew up watching my fair share of grew up watching my fair share of Disney Channel and Disney Channel original movies, but this one somehow flew under my radar back then. Although, granted, I'm wondering if this was around the time that Disney Channel was a premium channel.
It was put on TV, straight to TV in 1995. It showed only 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
And then suddenly they shelved it.
Yeah, and also, like I said, around that time, because I remember there was a period of time where Disney Channel was a premium channel, like HBO or Showtime, and my parents had basic cable, so I don't know if that might have been why I didn't remember it, or I don't know, but yeah, I'm just surprised they never I would have been old enough to have seen it as a kid, but had never saw it until this week. But I think it was, I mean, for a made for television made for television family movie, it's pretty it's decent. It's got a great. I was surprised at how stacked the cast of this movie was. I mean, you've got one of those kids from The Sandlot.
Yeah, the dad. You're killing me, Smalls. Only this time around,
Yep. Smalls from Sandlot. The dad from Transformers and Small Soldiers. Jane Brooke, whom I remember from Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter is Dead.
Yeah.
And then that little girl from Beethoven.
You also got that one of the punk kids from Free Willy, Tommy. He's eating that cake with the ketchup.
Yeah, but yeah, it was a pretty stacked cast. It kind of reminds me of this movie with Kieran Culkin and Eldon Henson called The Mighty, which was also about a terminally ill kid who was running.
Good one.
Yeah, that was a good one.
And I remember another film. I don't know whether it was 1993 or 1995, but another film called The Cure that was along a similar lines of this, except it was with a kid with AIDS.
Yeah, wasn't that the Ryan White kid?
But as far as it kind of reminds me of The Mighty in terms of like a story about a terminally ill kid writing a medieval fantasy story that parallels his life.
They'd always be showing you shit like that in school back in the day, like just to fuck your little world up.
I noticed that. Yeah, I noticed that from watching The Mighty in middle school.
I did forget to say that this film was directed by Peter Werner, and Christopher Millard is played by Tom Gurry. It also stars Christine Lahti and Kevin Dunn.
Yep.
So,
Christine Lahti. That's usually another one that you see in a lot of movies and TV shows.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
But yeah, I mean, some of the acting elements, some of the acting is a little soap opera-ish, but I get again. I feel like you kind of come to expect that from a made for TV movie made for family.
And also, Christine Lahti's best known as a soap star, and Jane Brooke. Both of them were what was it? Was it General Hospital? I can't remember.
Might have been General Hospital.
Chicago Hope. There you go.
Or like I was thinking L.A. Law or something. Oh yeah, Chicago Hope. I was thinking L.A. Law for some reason. But it's a good. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's a decent inspirational watch.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel, and I don't know why. Yeah, and I don't know why Disney didn't have it. Why Disney didn't air it have it in rotation more as often as their other made for TV movies.
And this is kind of why I kind of dislike The Mouse a little bit, because this movie had nothing like it in controversy to the to like Song of the South or something like that.
I would say to me, it's it's nothing. It's definitely not on that level. I would say, but it's like it seems like other Disney. It seems like other Disney Channel original movies are more just like screwball fantasies or like fans or like or
kids doing extreme sports. That was a big genre.
Sports or kids trying to be famous. Whereas this one's a bit more. I guess I don't know if the right word is like slice of life.
Brink would have took a pretty drastic turn if Brink friggin' broke his leg and found out he had bone cancer or something.
The way I feel about this film, because of the storyline, I picture it very similar to Sucker Punch.
Okay.
Interesting analogy.
I parallel it with it just because of.
I was thinking the same thing.
But let's go over to you, Roger. What was this a first time watch for you?
Absolutely, yes. I never even heard of it until you told me about it. So my first thoughts, I was concerned that I would be very bored with it, go with a made-for-TV movie. Thinking about it, I think it was, there's two parts to it, two different kinds of movies in it. But I did like the ones that centered around the kid, in his normal life. And for that, it was all right. I mean, I think it was definitely watchable.
Okay. Going over to you, Jake. Was this the first time watch for you?
It was indeed. And again, I'll have to admit, I had never heard of this movie either. This was entirely new to me. And, I'm just looking real quick. I was going through the cast here, and I think Forrest was the one to mention that the sister is from Beethoven.
Yes.
She appeared. This was her last credit according to IMDb.
Really?
And her first credit was Kindergarten Cop.
Oh.
She did Father of the Bride, an episode of Roseanne, 2 of the Beethovens, and a movie called Homewrecker, and this one. That's like her whole filmography. And I'm like, half of that is my childhood. Like Kindergarten Cop, Father of the Bride, Beethoven.
I would say almost, I would say more than half of it is probably Ivan Reitman.
Right. And then some of these other people, Tom Gurry, of course, I probably know more than anything else. He's been in a lot of stuff, including Sandlot and Wonder Wheel, interestingly, but starred as Jimmy, the wayward brother in The Black Donnellys, which was a great little show that should have gone longer. He basically did all the stupid stuff that put everything into motion in the first place. And I see that his buddy Tony was played by a dude who starred with Christina Ricci in a weird-ass movie called Pumpkin. So that was some
Also,
interesting connections there.
Free Willy remembers him from Free Willy. He's like,
I
that kid
barely remember Free Willy, but that's also
man.
part of my childhood.
I did just watch it not that long ago, but I guess didn't he also co-write Scott Pilgrim versus the World? I feel like I saw that on his thing.
I don't know. Maybe. But anyway, yeah. Oh, World Water Crisis. What is that? Oh yeah. He co-wrote the screenplay. Isn't that something? Okay, but yeah. So this was one that again I went in not really knowing. When Dave floated it, I was like, "What the hell is that?" And then every time Dave, I know. You're cool and all that, but every time you recommend something I've never heard of, I'm like, oh dear. and then Brandon's like, oh, just make sure you don't watch make sure you don't end the night on it or whatever. And I'm like, oh man. And then when I saw it, I was like, okay, of course Brandon oversold how depressing it is, because it really wasn't that depressing. What? It gives me the feels at a point, but other than that, it does lean more into the
inspirational.
Yeah, I get this might be the fundamental disconnect between me and Brandon on Grave of the Fireflies. The idea that what clearly is a depressing story, but it's told through the eyes of a kid who hasn't given up hope. That can make all the difference in my book. So. And I do love that.
This is why you need to watch Barefoot Gen.
And this is one of the reasons. And I was also intrigued to find out that it was actually based on this kid's actual experiences, and that just gives it a little bit of poignancy. And then again, at the end,
it is actually based on his short story,
right? Exactly.
Of the same name.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And
in reality, he did write it for real.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. That's like I like a kind of a story like that. It's kind of cool. And if it hadn't been summarily buried and forgotten in the graveyard of forgotten films by the mouse, then I would have said that was a great little story. As it is, it's kind of cruelly ironic that it. I don't know, Dave. It sounds like you're familiar with this one. You might remember exactly what they said at the end of the film. But what they said at the end of the film is something like, this story will go on forever, or something like that.
Yes.
And then I'm like, yes. Yeah. It's kind of ironic what happened to the movie.
Yeah, they basically shoved this film right back under the rug, slammed the door on it, and said, fuck y'all.
Pretty much. And yeah, I'm hard pressed to think why. Like, some of the stuff that Disney's done, it's kind of hard to explain away everything.
This one was unforgivable for me.
I would agree.
Yeah.
I think what it boils down to is probably because really late 90s, early 2000s is when Disney hardcore made the shift to being a lot more bubblegum. And I think that they probably didn't want like a Cancer Kid movie bringing people down. I personally think it should be illegal to maybe not let them go out of print, but to make movies that advertise some type of charitable foundation like that for terminally ill people. It should be like illegal to make those unavailable.
Yeah. I think with Disney, they probably got this one going and then probably immediately regretted not putting it on Touchstone or some other sub-label. Yeah. And they probably... I don't know why they didn't let Miramax put it out or something like that, for the home video release or something.
I would say this seems more like I would say either Touchstone or Hollywood Video or Hollywood Pictures.
This definitely would feel right at home with Touchstone, I think. But again, it's like Disney is afraid. They're like super, 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 super protective of their brand. To the point where they actually do themselves more harm than good, I think. But
by making all their money off of public domain narratives.
I do think that this one, I don't think it's a show-stopping work of genius. I do think that it's kind of it's a TV movie, and it kind of feels like one. Yeah. But it's a good one. If I had seen this as a kid, I probably would have very much enjoyed it. And we didn't have cable, so I wasn't going to see anything on Disney Channel then. That I don't even know if I knew there was a Disney Channel when this movie came out. So yeah, I missed that boat. But I'm glad I got to go back and see it. Yeah.
Okay. Normally I go in order here, but I do want to see what Game thought of this film. Was this a first time watch for you?
Yes, it was. I'd never heard of it, like most people. And I concur with Jake's sentiments that it, was definitely a TV movie at the time. It was better than I have seen worse TV movie acting in terms of soap opera type dialogue and stuff like that. This wasn't really quite that, but given the magnitude of the real person's story, which again I didn't know about until tonight, or sorry, I watched it over the weekend, but until preparing for tonight. But it seems to me like the real person's story could, if anything, this could use a remake, like a feature film remake, not a TV movie version, but I'm thinking if they did this like The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, or if they did this like Pan's Labyrinth or something like that, where the fantasy or the that kind of aspect of it is really strong. Honestly, that was there are really two movies going on. There's the real life segments, which are actually handled fairly well in terms of acting, in terms of just the way they're written, like things felt, pretty down to earth to me. The fantasy stuff to me felt kind of tacked on, and it felt, like it reminded me a little bit of like how TV shows like Power Rangers and stuff, whenever they would do some episode that was outside of the norm, where they'd have like, I remember there was this one episode of Power Rangers Zeo where Tommy couldn't stop singing like an opera singer. Like
and Tosh or Tanya,
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean, though? It's like they take something that has a certain formula to it that, at least to a certain extent, like, it's like a lot of Power Rangers. That's just what comes to mind at this moment. But like a lot of that was shot in like relatively normal settings, and of course, a monster attacks, and then extraordinary things happen. But even that being said, like whenever they would do something out of their own formula, like they would do like a classical fantasy setting or something that was out of their form, it would come across as kind of weird. In this case, you get some pretty decently done, pretty decently shot, pretty decently acted, real world stuff, and then the fantasy stuff to me felt a little either act on or just not like it was quite within their wheelhouse, which is sad because again that's really what the main focus of this is, like and that's why I bring up this Diving Bell and the Butterfly, and I bring up Pan's Labyrinth, because that the Diving Bell and the Butterfly was also a real story, which has some fantastical elements to the way that a person is able to escape the limitations of his body to free his mind and thus have a greater life than what his physical body can put him through, can make him experience. And then Pan's Labyrinth is about fantasy tied to reality to kind of escape from a horrific reality that is so increasingly horrific. And it's more of like, I think they had a good skeleton execution wise. I think it deserves a little bit better than just Disney Channel TV movie, which I have to say, this doesn't really feel like a Disney Channel movie to me, because it is so
Mhm.
it is attempting to be bubblegummy at all in the way that we typically think of a Disney Channel movie.
Well,
so I have to give credit
would
for that. But
it would appear that there is a production company attached to this besides Walt Disney Television.
Okay, so they picked it up.
Oburn Productions. So to me, I think Walt Disney just said, we like this this production. Let's tack our name onto it.
Wasn't Old Yeller a Disney Channel production?
I
mean, Disney production. So
different time.
I think Old Yeller before them.
Disney did a couple horror movies back in the day. People forget that shit.
Watcher in the Woods.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that was the early '80s, though. This was right in the Renaissance.
Well, they collaborated with Paramount to put out Dragon Slayer.
But maybe it's
But
as
point
one of
is,
those
I think,
transitionary movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, point is, I think the real story, if anything, I think it could stand to be remade, and it could stand to be like Guillermo del Toro could do this really well, or like if they did it like Diving Bell and the Butterfly, then I think it would really come alive.
You know, one thing that this is like a completely out of their idea, but if you're talking like Disney productions that would surprise the average person, one of my favorite live action Disney films is also one of my favorite David Lynch films, which is also based on a true story. He did the Straight Story for Disney, and that was a wonderful film. And I wonder what would happen if Lynch tried that approach with this. That would be interesting. But
what's interesting? So do you remember the Ben Stiller version of The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, which a lot of people hated? I actually liked it.
Oh, I love that film. Yeah.
Haven't seen it yet.
Well, I liked it because I thought the cinematography was shockingly good. I'm pretty shocked that it did not get a Best Cinematography nomination, because it was stunning to look at. And it wasn't really like they were trying to make a larger story out of what is ostensibly a pretty small story, and it's nothing like the original short story. The point is, like, you got ordinary life that's made extraordinary through the power of the imagination, and that's a feature film that does that. So this, I'm sure that there's room for something like that, especially with a real person's story and his ability to try to allegorically translate what he's going through. That part of it, the whole fantasy as allegory for real life suffering, like all of that definitely resonated with me. But it's just, I felt in a way like just doing it as a TV movie was not really serving the story, the real story, as well as it could have.
Okay. I'm going over to you, Brandon. What was this a first time watch for you?
Oh yeah, I had never heard of it, but it makes sense. I did watch the Disney Channel some growing up. I know when we transitioned from black and white to the color TV, and my father got a satellite dish, Disney was still free at the time.
Shake that cane, Brandon.
Back in the ancient 80s. But then, of course, So I watched a lot of that when I was in elementary school. I like watched Mousercise. My mother worked out to that in the morning, watched some Disney
Hell yeah.
cartoons.
I remember I was
But in the 90s, when this thing came out, Disney became locked behind a paywall, and it was an expensive paywall too.
I remember
This
that.
was-
Yeah.
It was not cheap. So I moved over to Nickelodeon, which was included with the satellite dish at that point. Even though I'd been back and forth between Nickelodeon and Disney at that time, I was all on board with Nickelodeon at that point. Then by the time 95 was out,
I would
was
say.
in my-
I mean, I watched both networks, but I would say I was more of a Nick kid, while my sister was more of a Disney
Yeah.
kid.
and by the time I got to 95, I wasn't watching. Even if Disney was available, I had no interest because I was a teen and I had my other things going. I did watch a little bit of the Nicktoons. I think the most Disney I watched was the Disney Afternoon, but that was on Fox, I believe. So
Fiction.
so those type of things. But yeah, so this movie passed me by when it was out. I don't know why, but it just kept reminding me of a Hallmark movie. The way it was put together, the way it was shot. Some of the subjects come across almost more Lifetime than Hallmark, because Lifetime does a lot of those darker subjects. So it kind of reminds me of the combination of a Hallmark movie and a Lifetime movie. If they were to get together and have a baby.
Those old school
Lifetime-
Lifetime movies were the shit.
Lifetime is kind of weird because so Hallmark movies, you can pretty much always count on them being like so inoffensive that your grandma could binge on it and not be offended at anything. Lifetime used to be a little bit more clean
it
cut,
could get
cookie
dark.
cutter, but then especially
They went hard with it on some. Isn't there one with like Natalie Portman where she plays this abused little girl or some shit like that?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, they do that. They talk about rape. They do incest. They got some nasty subjects.
Well,
in Lifetime.
there was that great there's that great video from the last drive-in with Joe Bob Briggs where he was like, people always ask me where the great exploitation movies are. They're on the Lifetime Network, and he goes into a whole big like 13,
For a while, yeah.
whole big like 13-minute rant about it. But it's just
You want to be traumatized? Watch a Lifetime.
Yeah, I was just gonna say you want that list, Roger. Several of them might be Lifetime movies.
But it's just funny. It's just funny to me that you say that because, I think, to me, this does have some aspects of. I wouldn't say a Hallmark movie because this deals with more serious subjects, but
I felt the
Lifetime,
family aspect, the kind of almost campiness of some of the family scenes.
Well, especially
did
in the
remind me
beginning.
more of it.
Yeah,
But,
it was like a Christmas card with cancer. That's
but that's why I say I think it was more of like a cross between the two. But I do agree with Dane.
I think you've created a great tagline there.
I think if this was handled in a different manner, it could have come across a little bit, much more differently than that. And I do think, have Darren Aronofsky do this bad boy. And,
Oh hell!
it would have been a very different film, and I think we would be talking about it much earlier.
Now, you know what though? I wouldn't say Aronofsky, but you're not far off. You know who should have done this? Would have been Spike Jonze.
Spike
I
Jonze
could
is
see
good.
that. Yeah.
Because of his version of Where the Wild Things Are.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Jones is definitely a good choice for this, I think, if you wanted to go a little edgier and weirder.
Well, what you don't want to have happen with this, because again, it's a real story and it's a serious one, and it does not have a happy ending. So you got to treat it as such. It cannot be it can't look like Diary of a Wimpy Kid or something where it's like everything is overly bright, overly cutesy. It's like, no, this needs to be treated like the serious story it is.
Mm-hmm.
Shoot, you could even have Zack Snyder behind it. He could utilize those sepia tones
Shoot
for
it
some
4.3.
awesome action
That's
stuff.
what I'm saying.
Well, if he did Sucker Punch, like you said,
Yeah.
My money would still be for Spike Jonze or Guillermo del Toro or I don't think
There was
Julian Schnabel, I don't think would do it, but
Now, there was one other film that kind of reminded me of the live action scenes, which is a film that I detest. But
The
it's
live
called,
action scenes?
Yeah, well, okay, they're both live action. The non-fantasy scenes,
It's that
which
animated.
would
the
be
real world.
well, which is a film called My Life, which is another film about a guy, but he's dying of cancer, and he is trying to impart a last kind of last bit of information to his child that he knows is coming, and knows that he's never going to see this child, and the child's never going to have is not going to know him as a father. So him trying to get through that and
Or-
go through it as an
Or
adult.
something like P.S. I Love You, which was
Yeah,
kind
it was
of
okay.
a romantic chick flick,
Yeah.
where after after this guy was dead, he left letters to his fiance, and she followed and went on a journey.
That's-
hmm
That's the one with Gerard Butler, right?
Yeah, Gerard Butler and oh geez, I'm drawing a blank on the girl.
I'm just saying that
Oh.
it's in a similar. It's in a similar film curl to this type of thing. So, but Mo, was this a first time watch for you?
Well, I thought that it was going to be, and then as I put in the chat earlier, like I totally had caught this somehow as a kid. I don't know if it was on TV because we certainly didn't have any pay cable shit back then. My parents weren't forking over any cash for that. But we used to have these super old people and nice people that lived next door named Pat and Leonard that had cable, and they thought we were like cute kids or whatever. So they would tape tons of shit just endlessly onto like stacks of blank VHS tapes for us. So that very well may be how I saw this as a kid, and it's entirely possible in my mom's storage there still might be a tape with this on there. I'm gonna have to go on a little hunt here soon. I absolutely loved it, dude. I mean, not only because there was that realization of like, holy shit, I've seen this before, this is awesome, but also because, in addition to like B movies and straight to video stuff that you guys are all aware I quite enjoy, TV movies are a big thing for me. I love TV movies. There's something about that Hallmark Lifetime soap opera quality to the shit that I really love. Just the way that they're shot on like almost cable access cameras, everything about the shit I tend to love. Shouts out to Moon of the Wolf if you want a really good TV werewolf movie. I think that this movie does a great job of putting this story across. Like I mentioned earlier, it's one of those films that, they totally would have shown us in school back in the day. Because I feel like you were always seeing like some heartbreaking fucking TV movie in like your social studies class. And then the rest of your day it was kind of a bummer. But you were glad that you saw the movie,
My social studies class, they actually put on a radio broadcast of like real newscasters of what it would have been like during the Mount Vesuvius, when the lava erupted.
Yeah,
and
that's middle of hell.
You had a family being tossed to a gladiator pit on one hand.
Fuck yeah.
So
that sounds awesome.
These are the horror things that they tended to put in your history class.
And then randomly they make you watch
Right.
Force Whisperer and you see Robert Redford's ass, and I had to
And
get a
we
permission
watched,
slip signed for that.
And we just watched a bunch of Blackadder and Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Nice.
No, but I love this, man. I thought that it was executed fairly perfectly for a TV movie of the time. I would disagree with most people. I think if you adjust your expectations to TV movies of the time, the fantasy shit was executed pretty well. A lot of it almost had like a feeling of like an episode of Hercules or Xena for a brief moment there,
It's definitely, you are right as far as relative to the competition
Yeah.
of the time. It's executed fairly well. It's just I I see the potential for this story.
Oh, it for sure has that. I would be hesitant. I mean, I like this enough. I would be hesitant to say that I'd want it remade by like some artsy dude, because there's a certain like innocence and honesty to these TV movies about like these tragic true stories that came out back in the day. Whereas I feel like, of course, if somebody like some big director like that did it, it's going to become wank for their artistic vision or whatever. And a lot of your focus is going to be on that rather than the actual story itself necessarily. So I could see how it would rule, but it wouldn't be my first option for it. I said earlier, I think that.
What's that?
Ron Howard there.
I think it's really more pertinent that it be brought back into print or into availability for people to see. Like I said earlier, I think it really should be like fucking illegal for them to make these movies about that and distribute them for a while that, promote these charitable causes for terminally ill people and then pull them from the shelf or pull them from viewability. This should be on Disney Plus for sure.
Well, there unfortunately is a long history of TV movies that have just fallen by the wayside. And I've wondered for some time, like how many of them are actually lost and how many, because I'd like to see a lot of them see a physical release just to, even the ones that kind of sucked or infamously sucked. Those of us who saw them might kind of want to revisit them to see how.
Well, and something like this might even be available. I mean, if it ever had a video release, it very well could be on VHSPS.com. You could get a print on demand DVD of it possibly.
I've seen some bootleg sites actually carry this. In fact, there are a couple of them on eBay, but I've seen some, and this is just something that you can technically do in your home. Just
you could,
just put it to a disc, and because I, for the life of me, was looking around for this film for like at least 10, going on 11 years. And then finally it showed up on YouTube, for free.
Shit, make yourself a boot of it, dude.
Yeah,
I feel hesitant to even call that stuff bootleg, because it's like.
Unfortunately, it is the quality that it is on YouTube, because it was like only on Disney Channel like 3 or 4 times recurring for like 6 weeks.
Well, that's the thing, dude. If someone has like a clean VHS of this out there somewhere, I'm gonna go look through her storage.
It was never put out on any VHS.
Yeah, but somebody. Obviously, I saw it, and I'm betting it was from a tape Pat and Leonard gave us, man. So I'm sure tons of other people taped it because that was a thing to do back then.
Yes, in fact, we taped it at one point in time, but then my mom got a hold of it for her crap.
Well, there are tapes of the Star Wars Christmas special.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, the Star Wars holiday special survived, then
if it's got a clean VHS source out there, it would be that possibility. It's available through VHSPS, and I hesitate to call that stuff bootlegging because it's not out there. They're keeping the shit available. It's different than if they're like making some crappy rip knockoff of like an available film or something that was available at one point, but
I can't speak for the YouTube one because I watched it on my on a bootleg DVD I bought. Now the bootleg DVD,
it was 480p.
The sound and picture were pretty crisp as far as I'm concerned. It's not any 1080, but it was still pretty decent.
I feel like the YouTube one, other than some little bit of a tracking issue at the bottom of the screen occasionally, looked pretty good. If anything, that just made me a little more nostalgic. Like 480p is about the average for a VHS rip, I feel like.
Yeah, there was no tracking at the bottom of mine. It was just kind of pretty clear picture, actually. So I was surprised.
Well, what was there's a it's interesting with so you mentioned Disney Plus. There's a surprising amount of like that now Disney Plus's slate is pretty impressive just because of how deep in the archives they go and how much there really is in terms of movies and TV.
Oh, that's
So
great.
it's pretty
Unless they're
robust.
streaming Song of the South, I don't want to hear about it.
Wow. I mean, is anyone really going to sit around and
Or
talk
Aladdin
about
the
that repeatedly,
series.
though? You know,
Yeah, Aladdin the series they won't do.
I would agree with Dave on this one, though. It's pretty fucking unforgivable that they don't have this out there.
Well, I'm not
Yeah.
shocked. I'm not shocked that they don't. But point being that there are some notable like that one I understand because that has a long history. But what I'm talking
Actually,
about
I'm
is
sure-
like
I just had a thought because this has just crossed my mind because because I was wondering for a while like how come Disney Plus didn't have the original Brave Little Toaster but had the sequels, or why they don't have this because so both this movie and the Brave Little Toaster were produced by other studios and
Yeah.
acquired by
Yeah.
Disney for
Yeah.
distribution, and so I don't know if
It
it's
might be that
a distribution
Disney.
issue.
Well,
It
and
might, yeah, it
same-
might not even be Disney's ability to distribute it. Disney might not even have the rights to distribute this film.
yeah. Well, and same. That's what I was gonna say. Like same with Popeye and Dragon Slayer, which they collaborated with Paramount on.
That got a lot of Fangoria coverage back in the day,
Mhm.
Dragon Slayer, which is
Yeah.
I love Dragon Slayer.
interesting.
Those are those are technically Disney films, but they don't necessarily have.
Yeah, it's
Home
rad
video
to
or
think that
streaming
there was
rights.
like a Disney film, air quotes, in Fangoria
Yeah.
several times. You know, I don't know though. Something like Song of the South. I mean, it's not a hard movie to see if you want to see it, and it'd just be silly for any like current
Yeah, that
company now to
Yeah.
have something like that out. But something like this, there's like nothing offensive about this. It's just kind of
No.
a bummer.
It's
you
like
know?
that.
That's-
It's
but
like
here's
that
the-
Nazi
here's-
Donald Duck film. You don't see that often either.
But here's the weird thing though. So as I was researching Oztober, Disney has returned to Oz on Disney Plus, which is awesome. Glad that they do. But for whatever reason, they don't have the Muppets Wizard of Oz, nor do they have Oz the Great and Powerful, both of which are Disney things, and not like with other companies or whatever. And it's like, well, why? And those are like
Yeah, there's a
recent-
certain amount of Muppets
That's
that
weird.
might be owned more by the Henson Company than Disney.
Well,
Forrest might be
if-
on to something with some of the shit being like.
If
you know,
memory serves, what Damon just saying though, if memory serves, I believe that Oz the Great and Powerful was a straight up Disney production.
that very well
and-
might
almost-
be.
Yeah,
but-
and the Muppets Wizard of Oz was the very first Muppets production when they had been bought by Disney fully, so there's no excuse on that one. But my point being that there are some notable
Maybe.
deletions or omissions. Now, in this case, I'm willing to bet that maybe Disney doesn't actually own the rights to this, but still, it's just kind of weird that certain ones that are pretty big releases, for whatever reason, they're not on there yet. Maybe
I
they're.
wonder how
waiting
much
to-
it would be to purchase the rights to it.
I don't
Yeah.
know. It's a good question, but like,
Get it with my
Yeah.
tax return, fucking
Well, but
TV
then-
movie rights for like $400 or something. I don't know.
then meanwhile,
I would have to
funnel it
say
through
if-
Anhedenia Productions.
I would have to say with this particular film, if it were that production company's thing, it might be something that the Four Diamonds Fund, the people behind them, might know about. too.
maybe. Well, and then meanwhile, you have what was I gonna say? Yeah. Meanwhile, with Disney Plus, they have been expanding their catalog pretty readily now that they've been getting as many 20th Century Fox movies that are relatively family friendly on there as well. So then it's like, well, if they can do that, then why can't they do some of those? You know, like the Muppets Wizard of Oz. Why can't they do Oz the Great and Powerful? And why can't they do this? Because, like Mo said, I doubt that the right situation is probably all that expensive. The question, I guess, is the demand. If there's really
That too.
enough.
But
of a
you,
demand for
you
this.
wouldn't know because it was only broadcast a few times.
You
so
will
it's
not
like-
believe how many.
I bet you this would do good
people-
on there.
You will not believe how many people I saw looking for this film when I was looking for it, and I was pretty well surfing the IMDb discussion boards at that time. There were so many people looking for a copy of this film. It is beyond possibility.
Was that just a slight bit of confirmation bias, or were you seeing that from other sources?
I was seeing that from others. People were looking for copies of this film, like straight up copies. So,
Okay.
but
I'm not denying. I'm just trying to whittle it
Well,
down.
regardless of all that, I think this is the right amount of touching that nowadays everyone's either on the internet. People are either a prick or they're sappy motherfuckers watching cat videos and like sad stories like this. You know, so I think that this would do well on Disney Plus.
I
Well-
will say that there are you got. This is not, of course, the only one like that. I mean, most of us have seen something as a child or older that never got a physical release, or that is extremely obscure. I mean, I could think of some animated ones, like say, there's a Japanese and American compilation animated film called Mouse and His Child that I remember
Right.
watching when I was young. And it's freaky as hell. But and I've got a bootleg of it because I have yet to ever run into a freaking physical release or any streaming release for it, really, other than YouTube. So again, there's a lot of films like that out there, unfortunately.
and
I mean,
then-
dude, even just on like the horror tip, there's a lot of great stuff from like the video rental era of horror that still hasn't. I mean, we're lucky enough that in especially the last 10 years, horror has boomed. We all these boutique companies have came out that release all these awesome releases of mainstream and obscure films. But there's still a lot of it that probably is never coming out, you know.
Look at look at the tragedy of the splatter films of the 70s. Many
Yeah.
of those, the film stock is rotted, and they just are gone for good. There are no
Well,
copies left. It's just
you talk about ones that, like, as I'm saying all this stuff because it's on my mind because of the Muppets Wizard of Oz episode of Oztober I just finished editing. But like I did a whole big bit about the direct-to-video Muppet Classic Theater, which I remembered seeing advertised all the time on the VHS tapes, and then I rented it from the video store, and I absolutely loved it. But no DVD, no Blu-ray, no Disney Plus. It's like, what the hell, you know? That cannot be expensive to get on Disney Plus, and it's a really damn good direct-to-video film. That we should probably talk about at some point.
there's a Muppet version of Bremen Time Musicians that I remembered as a kid too. That may or may not be a Disney like related film, and yet the only copy that I can find it on is YouTube. So
We need a fucking Muppets version of the Ghoulies where they do a satanic ritual and just summon Gonzo and fucking Animal out of the goddamn well.
On that note, I think we should get into the
I think that's a
plot
good
of this
idea.
film.
What plot?
So, the beginning of this film starts out with a knight basically talking or giving us an introduction to Sir Millard. And basically, it's kind of like it's set in the time frame of the Knights of the Round Table, King Arthur ish, Arthurian legend setting.
I don't know why. Maybe it was because the old dude narrating in the forest, but it was giving me Troll 2 vibes. I think that's just because I watched Troll 2 semi recently, but I got a kick out of that.
But in any case, we kind of get a moment in Arthurian history where Sir Millard has to pull a sword from the stone, being that he is a knight of the Round Table set on a quest. And that is the beginning of this film. So what do y'all think about that very beginning piece there?
I like it. It starts out fun, and then the way it bleeds into the kids just playing around or whatever is pretty awesome. don't think it's the strongest like example of the fantasy in the movie, but I mean, you can't expect them to blow their whole load in the first scene, you know. I like how there was that text over the screen when it started his narration, so it gave it that old school storybook feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do find the beginning parts of this movie rather amusing, more so in the real world bits because of how kind of very, very idyllic they are, and then of course how much things go downhill, pretty quick. And well, the sad part about it, just thinking about it, so the worst symptom that the kid has at the beginning is a stuffy nose that won't go away. And of course, as we learn, it's a lot more than that. But
yeah, that's how it starts a lot of the times with the big C, man. Like, it's just my uncle just had an aching leg for like a couple of years and then finally got it checked out. Turns out bone cancer.
Well, and the name of the cancer that eventually Chris learns that he has, or actually his parents for the most part, because I think they tried to shelter him and his sister from what he really had,
especially the dad.
Mm-hmm. It was called rhabdomyosarcoma.
Damn, Dave, I was waiting this whole time for you to try to pronounce that, and I swore you were gonna fuck it up. Good job.
which
you didn't fuck
it is kind of why he uses that Raptenahad.
Yep, exactly why he uses
the name for the sorceress in his story, which we'll get to in a moment, because we then, after the sword play, meet his sister and his parents, as they seem to be a fun-loving family. And in the background here, his father, it looks like he does, he works as a musician teacher, possibly.
I just always find myself mesmerized by that dude's hairline, so I don't remember.
Because he brings home a violin case or something like that.
Yeah, let's see. You're on something.
He said music lessons, which it was fun. So a couple things about the dad there. I was like, I swear I know him, and then I looked it up. Oh, it's Sam Witwicky's dad from the Transformers movies.
Yep.
Yep.
So that's how I know
also
him.
Small Soldiers.
Yeah,
that's such a generational gap there. You either know him from Small Soldiers or Transformers. Like,
yeah,
I'm Team Small Soldiers all the way.
I don't know him both and Ghostbusters too. So
they're all fun right there. I mean, now the Transformers movie, the other.
I have my issues with them, but I accept them.
The first Transformers I liked quite a bit.
I enjoyed them all, but I was varying levels of drunk when I watched them. So.
They go downhill.
That's the way to watch them.
Yeah,
he's a warrior.
They go downhill pretty fast after the first one, and the first one's not even like all that good of a movie. It's just kind of fun junk food, basically. But the point being, so that's him, and then his occupation. It seems like he's a music teacher or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, geez, how the times have changed, because he's talking about building a whole new house and all this stuff, and it's like music teachers can barely afford much of anything,
right?
And
he must be teaching like some highbrow like fart sniffer shit at some college for classical kids or something.
Yep.
What did the mother do? I can't remember.
I
Was
think-
it
I
a real
think-
estate agent or
I think-
something?
Yeah.
Okay.
She's hot.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I know him primarily from Hot Shots, but
Well, but it's just, I found that interesting. So like, it is a period piece, it's 95, whatever it was when it was.
But it's set in the early 70s.
Yeah, exactly. Set
Right.
then. But it's like, oh, gee whiz, you could be a music teacher, you could be like an artisan of some kind, and you could actually afford to live. Nowadays you can't. It's just times have changed.
That's
Very
something
sad.
I would point out too about the beginning of that Forrest mentioned there, is that yes, it is set in the 70s or whatever, but they don't drive it home all the time. So it is very easily applied to like the 90s, unless you're paying attention, especially as a kid, and you notice like how he stores his baseball cards. I don't know. Me and Forrest might be the only ones in here who actually collected sports cards.
I collected sports cards.
I did.
We had the.
I remember having
plastic
Donruss
by our-
92, and I remember having Topps baseball cards, and always the gold cards were like always the ones that were and of course, do you remember when Cops actually gave out baseball cards?
No.
Sort
Why
of
would
ring
they
a
do
bell.
that?
I feel like
Here in Milwaukee,
get in with kids, dude.
Here in Milwaukee, during
turning
the
into a narc.
90s, you could actually walk up to a Milwaukee cop, and they could probably give you like the next best Brewers card.
I never had
Why?
that. I
What's
didn't
the-
never try, but
what's
they
the
would bring
point?
them to like dare to get in with kids, bro. Like
Yeah.
cops do that all
Yeah.
the time. They recently had a scandal about having that video game truck in New York or whatever, or the bus, because it gets them in with kids, and it's supposed to make kids less afraid of cops. But the thing is, they fucking will straight up like gather information on you while you're doing that. So you just got to be, or they want to turn you into a fucking narc, so you'll come to them for baseball cards and bubble gum. Tell them what's been going on the street.
The bubble gum was the thing. I remember as in elementary school, we would have the the prizes given out if you did this, that, or the other. And the Topps baseball cards packs were one of the prizes, and of course, everyone wanted the baseball cards. And it was
Shitty stick of
basically
gum in there.
exactly. You'd have the gum, and
You guys got cool cops coming to your schools. My cops were jerks.
Hell, I remember the DARE program. So,
Yeah, I graduated from
yeah,
that like
jeez.
twice, dude, and I did all
Just-
types
Oh,
of
gosh.
drugs. It's fucking-
I remember Derek
mean,
coming to the school and the cops telling
it's
you, if
it's
we catch you
because
with this, we'll shoot you.
it's because of the DARE
Nice.
program. There's another short cartoon called Cartoon All Stars.
Yes, I
Yes.
used to rent the fuck out
that
of that, dude.
that needs a physical
Yes.
re-release.
Yes.
Yeah, that was gonna-
Although I'm not
what the
sure-
fuck to get rights to.
Although I'm not sure how dated the George and Barbara Bush
Oh, the
intro
movie,
on that
it would
thing
be
with their
unbelievably
puppy
dated. It would be unbelievably dated in every way.
Awesome to have.
But
The whole thing is dated because of the cartoons they got in there. You know.
You
Well, and
quiet
also
your
just-
mouth, you heathen. That's
Yeah,
and
that'd
also
be
you
better.
just 'cause
speak
the-
about Alf that way.
Well, and also just because the whole war on drugs was bullshit, but that's
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if
The
anything,
whole
Dare
thing
just taught me how to properly identify
You
drugs.
can-
when I was
you
buying
can
them.
Also,
Yeah, the whole
most
thing
kids
is-
watch it for the crossover, not for the message.
Yeah.
exactly.
The whole thing
I
Uh,
remember all the cartoons and the comic books about the drugs. They put special comics.
Oh yeah,
But
Spider-Man was
the-
telling you not to do
There
cocaine.
Power
too.
Pack.
There too,
Big.
you had the inspirational message, just like
Well,
this
but-
one. So
So here's
Point being, though, I found it really interesting that they don't really floor home the 70s thing, because in the 90s, it really wasn't that far back that it was a novelty, I suppose.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
more of like just a reality of the story. And unless you're really paying attention, you're not to like how his baseball cards are stored in his binder, because like when me and Forrest and
Yeah,
Dave were
yeah.
kids, we had the translucent plastic. He was
Yep.
doing it fully like photo album style.
Or
And
even
that's
when he's watching, you notice when he's watching the games on TV, when he's watching baseball.
Yeah,
on
that's a
TV,
dead giveaway too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The video quality.
I found it
Then-
super charming how his most notable role at this point was, I mean, granted, this is just an element of being kids at the time, but, because all kids were into like baseball or some sport or another, and even if they didn't really like it, they just wanted to be cool with their friends and like collect cards and pencils and awesome bookmarks. God, I missed the Scholastic Book Fair. Point
oh god,
is, again,
I
it's
miss
really
Scholastic
cool how he's
orders
most
in
known.
general.
It's really cool how he's most known for Sandlot, and then baseball is a prevalent element in this movie. That was made.
Well, I was gonna say, like, so I can tell that this is a period piece because the kids are going outside, they're playing sports, they're talking about baseball. Kids these days don't do any of that shit.
And they were fighting with swords, which is
Yeah,
something that I haven't done since God, when I was a kid.
Well, I was hit puberty, so
yeah.
Or
My
your
mom-
dad would like cut you out a bunch of guns from
My-
plywood and paint
my
them.
mom-
and shit.
My mom taught fabric painting at a place called Texaract Arts and Crafts
Oh,
out in Mequon, and
yeah.
the owners, their sons, we used to play with them, and they actually had like these wooden swords that looked like so badass that we would fight with them.
Dude, yeah, fucking my dad used to spend hours on the table saw, like cutting us out swords and legit looking guns that he would. I don't know how he did it with like stencils and stuff, but he would paint them with like spray paint to look like a real Tommy gun or some shit. And it was just the best times. I would like to point out that that's a huge misconception with kids. Kids still go outside all the time. I have a kid. My cousin has like fucking uncountable kids, like 7 little blonde bastards running around. We live in a neighborhood with tons of kids, and they're always still out there doing the same shit with scooters. Yes, when they're inside, they're sitting on their iPads and stuff. But I think the kids that don't do anything are like the product of weird suburban overprivileged households that just don't give a fuck.
I don't know. I went.
We don't force them to either. They do it on their own. Like they're just out there.
I went not too recently to a Golden Corral, and I swear to God, the table across from me, both the kids were on their phone, and so was their mom, and throughout the whole fucking meal, they didn't look up worth a damn.
Well, that's the thing, dude. I mean, when they're inside, when they're at like a restaurant with their fucking boring parents that don't pay attention to them, then of course they're like on their phones and there, you know.
It starts somewhere, doesn't it? You know, it's like the kid. The phones didn't just miraculously appear in their hands, nor.
They didn't.
No, although that's gonna happen eventually. We'll just have every kid will be born with a phone in their hand.
Yeah, they just fly out of the womb already in line for the new iPhone.
It's attached to their ear from birth.
Yeah, well, but
it's also city versus country kids as well.
I guess
you gotta keep that in mind too, because when I was young, we could go anywhere and they just tell you, come back before dark. That was it. Whereas now, I don't know if many people will do that now. They just kind of.
I still send my kid walks to school. She comes home when it's dark. It's the same deal. I mean, it's the difference is you just educate your kids about it. Back when you were doing that, dude, was like a high time for fucking serial killers. Same thing with me. We had a better chance of getting abducted off the street than our kids do now.
I grew up taking the bus to school, whereas my nephew just walks.
Well, I came from the world where literally every stranger was gonna kill you or rape you or abduct you or something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the world I came from. So and I lived in a very safe neighborhood.
I might do several of those things to you, but they would all be consensual, Dan.
Maybe. And speaking of which, when we talked about the cops with the baseball cards and all that stuff, think about this. So. Adults giving out gifts to random children trying to win their favors. Oh, but wait, they have police officer uniforms, so they must be okay.
Then you grow up and you see Mystic River and you're like, wait a minute.
I'm just saying, you could easily frame that in a very different way if you just eliminated one detail, and then it's not so sweet, not so charming.
They're all Joe Pesci from Home Alone.
Yeah, exactly.
It would be a different story if it was in a rent-a-cut uniform, and you can definitely tell when they are.
Maybe.
Or if it was just some random guy who just wanted to win the favor of the neighborhood children for some reason.
Well, in any case, very quickly here, you kind of learn what kind of is going on, because the family has a dinner that night where at the end of it they mention that there are some tests, and he's like, "Oh man, what do you mean some tests?" And so he goes to the test, and that's when he has the first CAT scan by this female doctor, who ultimately becomes like this evil person in his mind later on.
Which I didn't get, to be honest with you. Like I get that I get that the movie is obviously for his mind. In his mind, he's obviously perceiving her that way, because I guess he's of that age where, because she's making him do the test and she becomes the bad guy, etc. But I mean, I'm pleased with the performance of the woman because actually I think she was
she's
my
great.
favorite. She was
Mhm.
my favorite because
Yeah, easily the best.
but she plays it very realistically like a real doctor because
Well, then
if
that's
if you've ever had to deal with a lot of doctors in your life,
it
you know,
fucking sucks. I hate it
well,
because they won't just talk to you like you're a person half the time, and
Well,
that's
but-
where I
Right.
think the villainous aspect comes in. It's not only
Like-
that he's
Well,
just
yeah,
getting
there's that
bad news.
uncaring, that detachment.
Yeah,
Well,
she's
no,
being
but-
very
Well,
blunt and matter of fact
there-
about
Well,
it.
but here's the thing though. Like I loved that about the character. I thought she was great because she
Yeah, it's realistic.
but she was realistic, but it's like it's not even like she's uncaring. I didn't really perceive her as being uncaring. I just perceived her as so if you've ever been around enough doctors in your life,
That's what they do,
well, but
especially when they deal with serious shit like that.
to
well,
to
but
an
they have
11-year-old child.
They have to.
Yeah.
They have to. But here's the thing: they have to be somewhat detached because they deal with that kind of stuff every day.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, well,
And
I mean,
you know,
in her mind,
it-
it's like this kid's dead anyway, so why should I attach
Exactly.
myself?
and
But she's
and
not
that's
doing it
fucked
out of
up for
malice.
one. But I get it. It's understandable. But like Dave said, you know, we also aren't 10, 11-year-old kids
Well,
perceiving
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Well,
And-
but okay, so like I had to do a lot of tests, and I had to do a lot of. I saw doctors all the time, growing up and everything. I never thought of them as villainous. I never thought.
Yeah,
of
but
them
was
as-
any of
and
it
they
for
all-
a terminal illness? I mean,
Well,
it's
but
like
even if-
she keeps
even
just
if-
telling you you're not getting better, and you're, you know,
Every
you
child
know,
is
understand
different.
enough to know you're gonna die probably.
I guess.
Depending on how sheltered you are as a child.
Well, and I was super sheltered. I'm saying that, you know, in spite of all that, I mean, the doctors are the ones who help you, and
Right.
I love the way she's written and portrayed because she comes across as extremely realistic, and I could sympathize with her because I could tell she does care about this kid, but she's really trying to not let herself get too attached because the likelihood of him dying is pretty high. But
Well,
she's not
right.
doing it out of malice though, and I just I don't know. I sympathize with characters like that they.
I sympathize with her,
they
but I could
don't-
totally see how he would paint her, at least at first, as the villain in the story, and then
I guess I've been in.
they have their
those-
whole moment later, and I'm
yeah,
sure we'll get to
and
that.
that part was great. The reconciliation.
The
Part, but
thing
like,
is,
my point is, I've been with plenty of doctors and plenty of life-threatening situations, and I've I never thought of them in any kind of malicious light, and so I guess it was more so that he doesn't really. I guess he must not see himself as like the sick kid, or the.
Oh, I've
bad
fully
normal
had
kid.
like
He-
I've snapped on doctors before, dude, where it's like, talk to me like I'm a fucking person.
he's
for a second,
an 11-year-old.
and just tell me what it does. It look like I'm having a heart attack, or is it just anxiety? Don't make me
He-
wait 4 fucking hours to find out, from your tests, so you can
Oh,
avoid
yeah.
getting sued. I'm not gonna sue you. I don't even have
Some
the fucking
doctors
money
are
to do
assholes.
that. You know?
I guess.
So
well, I-
doctors
talk
are
to me
pretty
like a
assholes.
person.
Well,
and
they
I'll
do
be
come-
Maybe I've just had really good luck because all the doctors
Maybe.
I've had have been really good to
Shoot,
me.
I know. Actually, Jake, I know you've had some bad. bad contact
Yes,
with
and
ER
I was going to say, I feel like we're having a lot of people who are kind of coming on one side or the other here, and I won't say it's a mixed bag because I've had a couple of doctors who I absolutely loved. I just thought they were wonderful, and I mean, I had my first major surgery when I was in kindergarten, and that doctor was great. He had a wonderful bedside manner, as it were. Like he was really good at making me feel like he was helping. You know what I mean? Like, and
Yeah.
the second time I had the same basic surgery was in college, and the doctor he seemed competent and he seemed good, but he had the very, 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 very unfortunate. I probably shouldn't mention his name on air, but let's just say it was an unfortunate name for a doctor to have.
Mhm.
And it did not inspire confidence, and his manner did not do much to fix that issue, even though it was. I can imagine an 11-year-old kid having even more of that sort of reaction. But then I've had a couple of doctors, the hospital that almost killed me, the guy that sent me home and said, "Oh, you got double pneumonia, but it's nothing. Just take some antibiotics. You'll be fine. Yeah, you can go to work." That was an example of a bad doctor that I have encountered. And
I mean,
so
it's-
there are definitely people who fall on different sides.
For sure. My current doctor's awesome. Dude
Yeah.
talks to me like I'm a person. He fucking lets me know that just because
Yeah.
I'm afraid for my health doesn't mean that I'm inconveniencing him. I mean, that's what they do. That's the reason he
Right.
drives out of there in a much nicer car than I do. It's, but the other ones that just fucking brush you off, or like, I get it. They have to be somewhat detached, but do that on your own
Right.
fucking time when you're dealing with kids, man.
As far as this particular, as Dr. Burke, I believe it was in this one, she did frustrate me because I felt like she could and probably should have tried to have a little bit more of that bedside manner. I feel like she was very straightforward. She was very businesslike and by the
But
book.
she was very clinical.
Yeah.
Very clinical. And I think even an adult, if they're facing cancer, is going to have difficulty with that approach.
Unless
yeah.
you're
And
like 80 or something, and you just don't give a fuck anymore.
Exactly,
Then that's
yeah.
where you're like, yeah, just tell it to me straight. I don't need any of your bullshit.
But I feel like she definitely did good with the projecting confidence and competence. She did a good job of basically doing most of the stuff a doctor needs to do. She just did not do a very good job of realizing this kid is pushing back because he feels brushed off.
Well, and he still wants to be a kid. He's got got ideas about the future, especially in that segment where we hear him talking about the stars and wishing about the future.
It did open it up for and it did open it up with her being that way, for the dad to be the one that was like overly reassuring and built this false sense of hope, So
well, but
that was also
so the perspective that I'm coming at it from is because I did go to so many doctors for pretty much all my life. It's like, and I sort of mentally, I kind of grew up with the the idea that I was the sick kid. I was the kid that wasn't like everyone else and all that stuff. So, I mean, that's part of it. But then also I have a great deal of sympathy for characters that they mean well and they want to do right for people and everything, but they have difficulties communicating. Again, they're not being malicious or whatever. They just have those problems. And I could tell with her that she had some impediments based on her personality. Because again, a lot of doctors, just by their very nature, they have to have some walls up for their own self-protection.
Of course. And maybe not the best choice to be treating kids, though, with cancer.
I guess so. But it's also like, I could imagine you do that for long enough and it's like you'd want to step in front of a train just because you're like, what's the point of living anymore? You see all these kids come in and then they don't come out, and that would probably wreck me over time, so I could understand her having to do some kind of self-preservation there. But
I'm not knocking her position on it at all. I'm just saying from his point of view it makes sense that she would be the stand-in for the evil sorceress, because she was doing all these tests and magic on him, and not really being the nicest person.
And she had to be a little bit dark because of her. I mean, as a part of the storyline, because she herself had to grow as a person a little bit as time went on.
Well, the only person in that field that I really felt kind of an antagonism to was this one nurse that I'm thinking of, who was a little bit like a not like a drill sergeant type. That's a little too extreme, but she was kind of like a get up out of the bed.
She was a bit
around.
rough.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, but so what happened was, it was after surgery, and I stayed in the hospital for like a month, and during that
I thought you were
time,
talking about the lady in the movie, because that also applies.
Well, Well, but no. Here's the thing. So the nurse I'm talking about, this person is a bit more subtle and a bit more just like a standard, like by the book kind of person. The person I'm thinking of was much more overtly like get up and move around the hospital and like she was the kind of person that my parents liked but I couldn't stand, and she was like the last person I wanted to see and talk to. But I also understand now why it was that way, because basically the sooner you got up and moving, the sooner you could get out. But it was just like that's the only time I can think of where I had real antagonism towards medical professionals of any kind.
I mean, having a kid,
if I'd have gotten this doctor even as a kid, I would have been fine with her. But you know,
having a kid definitely changed my mind on some of it, and I was able to see a wide variety of people. I mean, I got like in trouble during the birth of my kid because I forget what I said. I think like the kid was born and I said, "Oh, she's so beautiful, so slimy and new," and the doctor like took offense and like said something about it, and I was like, just kind of shrugged it off because in the moment I'm trying not to faint, but it's like, dude, you got my girlfriend splayed open like a fucking deer on the table in front of me. I just got a little kid. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm entitled to say whatever I want in the shock of the moment. You know, like, look at that. A baby just got pulled out of her stomach like that fucking scene in Alien. You know, can we take a moment here and like not be butthurt because I said she was slimy and new, which I was obviously looking at her and like just aghast that, oh, look at that. I made a baby.
I am triggered by your language.
And he never came back in there because thankfully, I was too in awe of my kid to have had any words with him. But I mean, as a bystander, I might have told him to shut the fuck up. You know, what the hell, dude? You did your job. Get out of here. Let him enjoy the kid and let the nurses finish up like they always do.
Well, in any case,
I just find it odd that she's the villain. Quote unquote.
I think it makes sense just because of the perspective, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Like I'm not blaming the movie at all because it portrays this character / real person. It's all about his perception of this person, and again, they show how much he really does care. So I'm not knocking it. I'm just
his perception is that more or less that she is kind of the cause of this whole disease.
Which is very realistic to what a lot of people feel, and well, that's in a similar vein. Like I was expecting some backlash with the way that the sister, like she is like, I got the lead in Swan Lake, and then he gets sick, and she's like, you're always ruining everything. I was kind of expecting people to like reference that, or for people to like hate her or whatever. And I was actually kind of expecting myself to kind of hate her, but then I was like, well, okay, think about it. Kids of that age, they really don't have much of a perception of, what's appropriate or any kind of perspective. And so I'm not surprised why she kind of felt that way.
Right.
And mostly because she's trying to perceive, she's trying to get a handle on this stuff, and she has no...
That's what I was going to say, because she was one of the first people when you think kids like that at that age, especially. Yeah, it seems like they totally lack that, but then sometimes they're surprisingly perceptive. And she was like the first person to come to him and be like, yo, you're not like getting better.
We're getting ahead of ourselves here.
I kind of perceived her as being like, I praised the writing of her because I felt like her reaction was very realistic to the way that a lot of little kids would process, or rather not process something that would give adults a hard time, and then you expect a kid to try to wrap their head around that. It's like it's hard to do. So I could sympathize with the girl. If I were to watch this when I was younger, I probably would have absolutely despised her. But knowing what I know now, it's like, well, I don't dislike her. I feel that. Again, she's not malicious, and she does come around quicker, and they make that part of the journey.
So, after that first initial a doctor visit, he is now told by his parents that he must now stay in the hospital for a specific amount of time. I'm not exactly sure how long, but to continue to be tested and to take a treatment for this disease of cancer that he has been found behind his nasal passage.
Yeah, basically, they thought it was a cyst. It turned out that it was the type of cancer Dave expertly pronounced earlier, and it's the doctor recommends immediate chemotherapy. So he stays behind in like the cancer ward of the hospital to take his first round of chemotherapy and like other tests and whatnot.
Well, and if you're gonna be pissed at anybody, I would be pissed at the dad just because he was too overly rosy for most of the thing. And I guess again that's part of his journey, is that his reaction to such a thing is kind of denial. But it's like I feel like he probably didn't help this kid's perception of things. But
probably not, but he meant well, man. I mean, it's unless you have a kid, I think it's hard to really grasp that might be the way I'd react to it at first. It's like, nah, we're gonna get rid of that. We'll do something here,
Well, you got to think about it. This is like summer vacation for him. So he's expecting to, as a kid, to be able to enjoy the rest of his summer. He has a whole life ahead of him. He doesn't even know what kind of a sprout he's going to become, and all of a sudden, bam, he's got to stay in this hospital. So, number one, the first person he's going to lash out in is the first person that tells him, no, we can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Well,
so that does make sense, but it's it's interesting that he has such kind of optimism about his life, and then it gets tragically taken away from him, and so like thematically, I think there's a lot of potential there. Which again, what we have here on the screen is not bad. It's just I could definitely see this being remade and done to its fullest nowadays. If anything, I think it could be fairly poignant if you had the right person to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine it could benefit from some complicated camera angles and visual effects,
Yeah, well, the best analogy I can think of is sort of like the 1990 TV miniseries version of it versus the two-parter movie. It's like the miniseries version was great for its time, and it obviously left an impact. And then you see what the film is able to do because they have bigger budget, they got a bigger scope, they tell the story in order, so that way it preserves the dramatic tension, all that stuff. And it's like then you watch it against the miniseries, and you're like, okay, yeah, this is a definite upgrade here. At least if we're talking in terms of production and just overall execution and everything. So I kind of look at this the same way. It's like if you were to get the upgraded version of this, and then you look back at the version they first attempt at it, you're like, okay, yeah, this is definitely an improvement. But again, what's there is not bad.
No,
it's just
definitely
it's
not.
on a different scale.
So while he's at the hospital, he ends up kind of befriending another patient who may or may not have the same thing as him, but ultimately they seem to get along rather uncannily.
That kid looked a lot like the kid from American Pie, but I don't think it was him.
No, it wasn't. You're talking about Thomas Nicholas?
But
the one from American Pie.
It was the same kid who was in A Kid in King Arthur's Court.
Yeah, well, and like I said, another notable one that he did later on was Inglourious Bastards. They played PFC Zimmerman.
Thomas Ian
it's in Django Unchained, Gangster Squad. Some interesting stuff later on. But yeah, he does have a little bit of a resemblance to Thomas Nicholas.
Yeah.
Just a
Well, in
bit.
any case, they
No,
bond
yeah.
over their love of baseball,
Mhm.
which I think was kind of nifty. But
And their
ultimately,
rivalry.
he
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
of course
yeah.
they root for different teams.
Phillies and Pirates. They keep it in PA though.
Right.
But ultimately, Chris is told that he can leave and go home. So his parents
Mhm.
pick him up, and he does go home. And when he does, it's like I think the next day he goes to school for the first time, given the wig that his parents have given him, because by this time he's kind of got his powder look going on, which is kind of sexy. But in any case, he has his first day at school, where at the end of the hour, they are given an assignment to tell. Well, this is the one that I always groaned at whenever they gave this to us. What did you do on your summer vacation?
Mhm.
It's been so long since I've had that assignment, or a summer vacation for that matter.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But
Well-
Basically, life just sucks. Is once you grow up, life just sucks from that point.
Pretty
on.
much.
well, and he basically goes up to his teacher and basically tells her. I mean, he's been sick this entire summer. He doesn't really feel like talking about it, much less reliving it. So she gives him some leeway and says, "Well, why don't you make it up? Make it fiction." So
I like the way that she says it. She's just like, "Fuck it, get out of my sight." You know, she doesn't give a shit. Which because
That's the way she says it? Wow, no wonder Disney doesn't want it released.
Yeah, well, I mean, but like that was you talk about dismissive adults. I felt like it's funny because I read the description of this and I was like, oh, that must be a really caring teacher that wants to bring out the student's creativity and to help him deal with a difficult situation.
Nah, she's just like, it's a required part of the curriculum. Make it up.
it's like when little Ralphie came up to his teacher and gave her that big basket of fruit, and she's like, "Ralphie, you can sit down now."
Well, I found that so funny because again, in my head when I'm reading what the story is about, when I kind of see the general setup, I'm kind of imagining like Robin Williams in Dead Poets Society, like someone that has a real love of teaching and wants to inspire, the young minds and stuff like that. No, this person is just a scholastic bureaucrat, basically. And I was like, wow, this woman does not give a shit. So basically, what she's telling this kid, or any of the kids for that matter, is you could just make up whatever horse shit you want. I don't care. I don't know. I found that very amusing, and I don't know if they
which probably
meant
adds to the stress of everything coming on too. As a kid, when your own teacher doesn't really give a shit about you,
Was this?
He didn't say it was cancer per se. He just said he was sick during the summer. But so he kind of downplays it. But point being that I found that kind of funny that in any other movie, that person would have been like a Robin Williams in Dead Poets Society, and I just realized Robin Williams played that kind of character, the teacher, and then he also played doctor type in like Awakenings and stuff like that. So it's like if he'd have been in this, then he would have been the defender of the kid and all that stuff. And then it would have been weird in a different way. But it's just like weird, meaning like it would have turned into a Robin Williams formula movie. But then he would have been a little too caring to this kid in an abnormal way, and instead of these people that were just sort of routinely dismissive.
Real quick, to stand up on his desk and say, "Oh, Captain Mike."
Right.
Yeah, really.
So, just to clarify, this the teacher was Miss Kern, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
So I'm just looking here, and I'm seeing that she is played by Catherine Coulson. We do have a strong David Lynch connection, because she apparently plays the log lady in both versions of Twin Peaks, and her career largely centers around Twin Peaks. This was
Dude,
actually
I
the
did
last
not
movie she did for
recognize
14
her.
years.
Me
I didn't
either.
recognize
Yeah.
her at all.
And she apparently died in Oregon. Yeah. Anyway.
Good place to go.
Well, in any case,
Log in
so
hand.
Chris Millard returns to routine with his family, and unfortunately, it's shortly like in between this routine returning that his friends kind of like he tries to help this girl with her locker, and his friends come over, knock his head off, and that's when
His friends?
reveal
That's
Mr. Clean is there.
Call him his friends.
Well, yeah, because they pretty much treated him like shit in the beginning too. I mean, a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this kid
Yeah, I would
doesn't
never
have much.
Mm-hmm.
defend them, but the
Correct.
initial knocking his hat off was innocent enough. They didn't know the rug was going to come with it.
Well,
Kids,
their reaction
kids are cruel
afterward,
overall.
Yeah, that's where they go wrong.
Like
Mhm.
Yes.
the mere act of knocking someone's head off is not like a capital offense or anything, but still, it led.
Nah, especially when it's over like sports or some nonsense. That's kind of, even if they were good friends, that's something that might have happened.
Yeah, but I really felt
And,
bad for him because the girl seemed to really like him at
I
first,
know.
and she just like walked out on his ass. I was like,
Well,
"Damn, girl,
I felt
why you
bad
got to
for-
diss the duck?"
Well, I
But
felt
that's the
bad
thing.
for-
Kids are like that, though.
And I felt
Yeah.
bad for this kid because, he didn't ask for any of that. Or for anything of what life gave him. He had his life ahead of him, and it just got taken away so suddenly. And so I can
Well, yeah,
understand why he retreated into the world of fiction because, that's something that
His-
life couldn't just take away from him.
His
you know?
disease in real life started when he was age 11, and he died when he was age 14. So
Yeah.
that is
Well, I think
entirely
it's a
way
long
too
battle.
long. That is entirely well. It was a long battle. I mean, he lasted 3 years, but
Yeah.
he finally lost the battle in the
Yeah.
end. But
They
he left
they,
a
they,
living legacy in this film.
they trim out some years in the movie for the sake of like TV movie runtime, but
Yeah.
you can tell by the end that he's obviously had enough tests and he's just ready to just not be sick all the time and just
Yeah.
go. And that happens with cancer patients.
Well-
That's exactly what happened with my uncle. He was like, you know what? I want to
The
have
part-
like 6 good months with my family, and then maybe I'll die horribly, but at least I'll have those 6 months of not feeling like shit every week.
The part that got to me was when he. Now it was a little unclear. It must have just been a temporary thing, but like there was that part where he says he can't see anymore, and that he was going to lose his
That
eyes and
happens
stuff.
from the chemo and shit.
Yeah. Well, but what the part that
Well, they
was
said it
really-
was pressing on the optic nerve,
Striking
right?
on his nerve because it
The
was
part-
spreading to his head.
Yeah, the part that was
That
kind
too.
of the part that was kind of unclear though was so they say that, but then they don't really like they bring him up. He continues to look at people, so it must not have been like a permanent thing quite yet. Because
It's
Well, they
more
said
that
it
it
could be
dulls
temporary.
it, I mean, for one, the chemo and stuff like that does affect it because my uncle didn't have anything to do with his head, but he definitely got to that point where he had to have like the TV real close to him and shit
Yeah.
because it just weakens your whole body doing like radiation and chemo and shit.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I've heard, but it.
Yeah, you can still. I mean, like you can still see a person. My eyes are basically good now with glasses, but when I take them off, shit's real blurry. But I can still like focus on a person that walks up to me.
Yeah.
Getting back to the main story, we have the moment where he realizes what he is going to write about because he sees his name up top, these 4 diamonds called Sir Chris Millard. And he basically that's when he begins to write the story that we've been kind of seeing snippets of from the get-go. This story began like when the film first began.
Yeah, pretty
So-
much. Like he's in a state before that where he's like doesn't give a fuck anymore. He's kind of being a little bitch to like his parents, and you know his mom tells him to clean up his room, and then in the process of that, he accidentally chucks like a pair of boxers or something onto that little coat of arms, and that inspires him to be like, oh shit, I could write my own like Arthurian thing, you know, because he's doing it with his sword that he used to play with. He's like chucking the laundry into his closet. You know?
Well, and that's with the fantasy segments in this film. Like I said, there's a noticeable disconnect between the drama that we are seeing unfold before us, which for the most part is actually handled pretty well. And you know, there are some TV movie moments to it, but like far less than for other movies of the time. And then I felt like the fantasy sequences, like they just weren't up to the same par. They felt a little disconnected from like stylistically and also just quality wise.
I
chalk
feel
that
exactly
up to just being from a
opposite.
kid. Yeah, I thought that worked really well because it felt like it was from a little kid, and it felt like he was purposely disconnecting from that stuff. You know.
Well, and I purposely loved the prose that before we get into that, so the backstory of the fantasy story is this. Sir Chris Millard has been sent on a journey to find this sorceress because she is the one that apparently is making this land be evil or whatever in the realm of King Arthur. So he sets out on a journey, finds her castle, and she basically says, "Okay, first you have to reach me in order to prove yourself worthy." And I love this little moment where she's laughing on top of this turret down at him, and she throws him a rope, and he climbs up, and he basically falls, and that's when he wakes up and he's in reality.
I love how she peers out of that statue exploding. That's such a good touch. It's the same lady playing the doctor too, right? Doing double duty through the whole movie, which is she deserves credit for that.
Well, she gets to do the other side of acting there, where she plays a character that's, well, on the one hand, the real world version is so kind of emotionally, she has a bit of a disconnect from people and that kind of stuff, and she's very restrained. Then this person is much more kind of classical, over the top villain. So that's, she gets to do both. But like I did find her rhyming to be pretty obnoxious.
I liked it.
I liked it.
I generally, I'm good with rhyming in general. Like even in like something like Snow White, which people don't really think of as being done in rhyme, but for the most part it actually is. But it's like you don't even notice it, given the way that the actors deliver their lines. Like they're not really emphasizing it. Like she's like going for it, you know.
Oh yeah,
and,
but she's really in the moment, and to be honest, she didn't fuck up a damn word. So to me, the poetry that was in her rhyming went with it, and it to me brought it like back to an age when like chivalry was.
It was supposed to be a fairly obvious like fairy tale fantasy story, you know. So it's not like she's trying to deliver it in a subtle, artistic, or nuanced way. It's supposed to read like the pages of a storybook. It's basically what those sequences are meant to do, you know.
What did some of the rest of you, Brandon per se, or Jake, what did y'all think about the fact that she rhymed?
It was cute. I mean, there were times where I would agree with what Dane said, where it was a little much. But on the other hand, if you think about it as this is based on this kid's story, if he wanted her to rhyme, then damn it, she's going to rhyme, and I got no problem with that.
It's a kid's story. That's what they do.
Yeah.
It's not the fact that she rhymes. That's not what I'm talking about. It's more so that it is an acting choice, and it's also I assume partially a directing choice as well, because like she's really like hamming it up there, which again is such a contrast to how pretty deft and delicate she is in the real world segment. Which again, I'm sure is part
Chris
of the contrast.
Millard actually rhymed in his story for her dialogue.
I'm sure.
I think it's supposed to come across more in the way that your mom would read you that story.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
be like
what
serious.
I'm talking about. Well, what I'm talking about is again, when I was watching Snow White as a kid, I never really connect, and I'm good at connecting the rhyming dots, and I was even then. Observing rhyme schemes and stuff like that, but
Reverend of the Rhyme, wicka 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 wicka.
As a kid, I never even noticed that especially the Wicked Queen, her dialogue is predominantly in rhyme, but it's not delivered in a way that's deliberately accentuating it. She's just delivering her lines emotionally in the right way that they should be delivered, and they just so happen to rhyme. And to me, that probably would have been a little bit more effective, and it might have made the fantasy sequences work a little better for me, just because the way that they're the way that they're portrayed, the way that they're done here, it makes it feel a little bit more like, again, it's like on this episode of Power Rangers, where the kids find themselves in the Middle Ages and they don't have their morphing powers.
I don't know if your mom read you a lot of stories as a kid, but I could swear my parents were ready to do like a mic drop after some of those rhymes. So.
Being a poet myself, I enjoyed rhyming.
Again, it's not the fact that she rhymed. That's not what I'm saying. I'm perfectly good with the rhymes. It's more so of like, the way that it's done there, it just feels very, very obvious and very clearly, like you talk about TV movie ish.
It's hokey.
It's hokey, yes.
It's meant to be.
But definitely
are though.
Anything that I wrote, I hated writing creatively in middle and high school, and it wasn't until college that I really embraced it as something I wanted to do. But like in anything I did write, I occasionally wrote stuff I was proud of at the time, but most of it, even then, I kind of was like, I don't know if I was familiar with the phrase cringy. The word cringy back then, but I think like if I think about it now, the things that I wrote at that age, they were pretty cringy, and any attempts at rhymes were obvious, and they were intended to be emphasized. And I would think that this kid, if this is in his story, he's going to intend it to be emphasized. It's not meant to flow together like regular speech. At least I wouldn't think it would be.
Fucking Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings riddle here. It's like some 11-year-old kid story from a TV movie in the mid-90s.
Well, and that part, that's all fine and good, and I'm glad that they seem to be preserving his cadence and kind of the way he wrote. Because I completely agree. When the earlier that you start writing, the worse that generally your output is. And that's anybody. I mean, Stephen King wasn't writing masterpieces at that time. Shakespeare wasn't writing masterpieces at that time, because nobody writes masterpieces at that time.
Now, again, you'll never know. A kid who fucking wrote Aragon was like, what, 14? So
that whole thing was such a flash in the pan.
I think he did 7 books, so I don't know if it was.
Oh no, it was a pretty popular fantasy series. It's just the movie.
The movie was like
the movie was a flash in the pan, but
he didn't get J.K. Rowling, but he wrote some good shit.
Well,
so it just depends. I mean, it's like Stephen King, for example, threw Carrie in the trash. His wife is the one who gets credit for that. So
the same thing with the original writer of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Robert Louis Stevenson.
Fucking
Yes.
Jake's probably got some
He-
crazy gems.
He was
I'm sure,
he
but
had
we'll never know.
he had a fever, Robert Louis Stevenson, and he wrote it while he was in a fever, and he threw it in the trash, and his wife picked it up and said, "Hey, you've got something here."
See, that's awesome to me. I respect the
Yeah.
shit out of that, much in the same way I would respect someone who took acid and went on a roller coaster, because I
Well,
think
they-
it's just, you know, like,
I think the moral of the story is have a wife that goes through your trash.
well, that could
Well, but-
be. I mean, yeah, sure.
But so my point is with all this is that I'm not knocking it for capturing the cadence of the original writer, who was not only under duress of the physical health variety, but was also a young person, a young writer. I'm not knocking it for that reason. What I'm saying is that the fantasy segments are, out of all the elements in this, I think the fantasy segments are the most clearly TV movie-ish, and it, like, when that was on, I was like, okay, get back to the drama, because
See, and I can't disagree more. Fucking
here
those
too.
segments
Here too.
were the set design was dope, the effects were dope. Like it's almost some of it's almost on par with like Full Moon shit that they were doing back then.
I really
And-
dug the labyrinth, like a look of that fantasy world. To me, I liked it.
Or just that whole
I
first
thought the
scene where.
fantasy was.
Go ahead.
I thought I kind of am halfway between, because I didn't think that the fantasy stuff was all that bad, but to me it wasn't really what I was why I was watching the film. I was watching the film for the drama elements, and the fantasy stuff was a little bit.
Okay,
in
my
between.
point is, had they
watching it for
not
both.
given you that,
I thought
and
the
you were just
I found the fantasy kind of just forget the fantasy aspect of it to be kind of forgettable.
Yeah.
well, because the
I'm not
rest of the
even-
movie was so much more compelling. Had they
Well,
not given you that, had it been some brief, like, fantasy film made for TV in the 90s, you might sit here and be like, yeah, the effects were actually pretty good for
I
what
thought
they were doing.
I thought
That lady
story,
exploding out of the fucking statue was dope. When she disintegrated his sword, like Full Moon
Well,
wasn't
I
even doing
thought the
effects as good as
story
that
of,
back then.
I thought the story of this boy who is technically a squire at this
Yeah.
moment, trying to earn his knighthood, goes on this quest, and this sorceress basically shows him this cool looking staff with these diamonds, and says, "Look, I will give you each of these diamonds at your feet, and if you do these 4 things for me." And she dares him to do it, and he sets out on this quest. And
you gotta wonder too if Final Fantasy ripped this dude off a little bit with the 4 crystals and them each representing different elements or whatever. And
Well, it's like the pro Jared joke. Gee, an epic RPG where you have to
then
collect 4 treasures
4
of the
crystals.
elements.
Yeah,
Never heard of that one before.
This, I think, definitely. Well, obviously, the short story predates all of it. The movie doesn't,
Yeah.
but that's
Well,
not
but,
saying
you
someone
know,
in
the-
Japan didn't get a hold of it and they're like, "That's a brilliant idea."
I think anything that's like 4 elements of whatever, I mean, that's older than.
Well, that's Homer, really.
Yeah,
You got the
that-
humors
that's-
and everything there.
Yeah, that goes way far back. You can't really attribute that to one source.
It's hard to
but,
ignore that 4 diamonds to 4 crystals parallel there, though.
Well,
yeah.
and if you think about it, you got Dark Crystal with the 1 crystal, So
Well, my point.
Trial
was-
by Stone, fucking awesome.
Yeah.
scene.
I'm not even like knocking people like for liking the fantasy bit, because I think I'll go this far. Without the fantasy aspects of this, I think that it wouldn't necessarily stand out against your standard like made for TV movie. My kid's dying of cancer, put this on the Lifetime network. It wouldn't really stand out from those. So I'm not knocking the fact that they have them, and obviously it's part of the real kid story. It's more so that I think that they had potential for a little bit more. But again, what's there?
Oh,
is
yeah.
not- What's there again, just like the rest of it. What's there is not bad or beyond the realm of enjoyment. It was just
I mean-
I think there's a noticeable difference in quality
Not to
between
keep
the-
drawing the parallel, but it did
Yeah.
remind me of a lot of like full moon shit that I've seen, like the fantasy sequence, the set design, the effects, and things like that. And there were certain ones, where she exploded out of that statue, or where she like disintegrated his sword, where I was like, whoa, that would have been fucking dope. And if like shot in Romania on a castle set with that full moon budget behind it. Because they've done similar things in movies, but just didn't do it as cool as this movie did it. So there was a lot of elements of that, the fantasy scenes and the effects and stuff, where it was like, damn, they did a lot with what little they were working with there, So I think that's more where I'm defending it from, is like the TV movie, B movie standpoint of they fucking were not screwing around when they made this movie.
Well,
Especially those.
Well, I think they seemed like they went about it in about as good of a way as one could have done, as far as like not just a TV movie from the mid '90s, but let alone a Disney Channel or whatever Disney movie on TV. So it's like all that is rated on a curve, admittedly.
Yeah, I mean, it's like any B movie. You rate it a little bit on a curve, regardless. You give them some slack.
Exactly. So I think relative to its competition, and its medium and everything, it's definitely above what other similar ones might have done.
Right.
Well-
So you see my point. You comparing it to Power Rangers is like a compliment.
It kind of was, but I was drawing more of a parallel of like, this is outside of this show's normal way of doing
Right,
things. And that's kind of the feel that I get whenever we go to a fantasy segment. Just because it's like, we don't normally do this, but we're going to do this for this, particular episode or this story arc or whatever. That's kind of how it feels, because even relative to the rest of it, it has that this isn't quite what we normally do feel. But I do think it's definitely above Power Rangers in terms of quality. Even with all that being said, I'm not saying it's not.
Back to the plot, since we
Yes.
are only like midway.
I know.
Well, he must
I
have
didn't
dies
think,
from here.
I didn't think this episode would give us so much to work with, but it
Yeah,
has.
well, I keep bringing
It's a
us
good movie.
back to the plot because there's a lot,
Yeah.
in such a little film. But in any case, the first thing that the sorceress tells him to go get is this fruit, which is on this tree in this very high mountain. And you see him take this journey up the mountain. You see a skeleton along the way, and he takes the fruit, and I guess eventually brings it back to the sorceress, and she's pissed off at him, of course. But he accomplishes it. What do we think about that particular segment?
Well, one thing
Oh,
I like about the fantasy and the real life progression, which I assume is in coordination with the real person's case, albeit crunched for time a little bit, because as we said, it started when he was 11 and then he died at age 14, so it's compressed. But I like the fact that it's not a straightforward decline. I like that there are little windows of time where you're like, oh, okay, maybe it is responding to treatment. Maybe things could work out. And then of course it comes back.
And that's
but I
pretty
like
realistic too. Real cancer shit. I mean, my
Yeah.
uncle went through that for a bit, where he was like fine for 2 years, and then it
Yeah.
took that turn again.
Well, but what I like about that is that the movie does portray that realistically, but then also it's reflected in the quests, because at first he seems like he's doing well, and then things don't go so well in the realm of fantasy also, and it's like so I like that they reflected the real life part of it, but that also the fantasy version reflected that as well. It wasn't just like a pure wish fulfillment thing.
Exactly.
It gets progressively darker, much like the real life situation.
Yeah. Well,
And the quests get
kinda-
progressively
kinda-
darker like that too. So yeah.
And I kind of wish that other stories, without the real person going through, cancer or whatever, but just like stories in general, I kind of wish that they had more of that kind of structure where it looks like you're gonna see things, the way that you're used to seeing them, and that the character, starts to achieve a lot of these milestones, but then then the character fails, and then they have to deal with themselves having failed. I wish that more of them did that.
Yeah, it's underutilized. I think for a reason though. Most people want to feel good when they watch a movie, and you can't do this shit all the time, or it would lack the punch. I realize,
And
other
I agree.
than Jake
Like if
being
you were to do
asleep,
that,
that we
if you
haven't
were to do
heard
that all
from.
the time-
Oh,
Go
God.
ahead. I was gonna say if you did that.
I was
all
gonna
the
say we
time-
haven't.
No, you go.
Yeah, if you do that all the time, it loses its punch a little bit. I was going to say, we haven't heard from Forrest or Roger at all. Roger,
Well, maybe they're
do you have any
gone.
thoughts on
Yep,
this?
I'm here. Yeah, I'm here.
Did you have any thoughts on some of the progression that we have come across?
Well, we were talking about the fantasy scenes. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah, the first one, supposedly the apple one or whatever it was, the fruit one, Fruit of the Loom scene.
Good day start with Fruit of the
The
Loom.
only apple I remember is the one when he smells an apple and then it can smell it for some reason.
Oh yeah,
Mark-
well because
your
he's
marks can
responding
smell
to
it.
treatment.
Yeah, I don't remember. To tell you
remember-
the truth, yeah, I agree with you. Good.
The fantasy scenes are not particularly what I was really paying attention to. I was mostly paying attention to the actual storyline, to the real, like I say that the real world storyline instead of the fantasy stuff. So I did kind of blank out on some of those fantasy things. And I hope it can get through it. Then said, oh, let's get back to the normal story. So then I would click the brain back on again.
Well,
Yeah,
we kind of missed the
fantasy
part
scenes kind of
where
moved together to me.
So I wasn't the only one that was sort of
initially
checking
she kind of takes him captive, and I remember the part where she like throws a plate of worms at him, and she does like a badass
Yeah.
Hannibal Lecter like thing,
Yeah.
taunting him. That part was pretty awesome. And then after that, she starts sending him on the quests. And I'll admit, even as much as I liked those scenes, like I was like taking bong hits and stuff, and it just it did kind of bleed together a little
Well,
bit. Like I remember him also trying to get the swan,
Yeah.
Well,
and
Again,
Yeah,
that's,
but,
that's,
it's
one of those. It's one of those things that you can tell is a lot more engaging to read than it necessarily is to watch because
well, it was
a lot
supposed
of
to be
those-
kind of just disjointed, like fantasizing in between the sickness of the
I
main.
thought of them as
plot of the
almost
movie.
dream sequences,
yeah,
or
well,
Yeah.
him doing daydreaming.
And that's fine. My point is because again, this was something that was written first and then it was adapted later. It's something that some things are just better to read than they are to watch.
And these
then-
parts would have been that, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I
But-
see where you're going with that.
and because then you look at these fantasy sequences after we've seen something in the real world, and what are they really telling us that we don't already know from the real world segments? All it is kind of augmenting that which we already knew from the real world, and then by the time that we see it again in allegorical form, it does not a whole lot else new is really told to us outside of this is just how he's processing it in the realm of
Yeah.
This
fantasy.
is how he deals
Well-
with the battle of his life.
Yeah,
and
well,
I
the
think
whole
that it
final
needed
scene,
the
though.
fantasy scenes to be there. Yes.
And
The whole
But
final
I-
scene where he's fighting that Black Knight is really where they finally like tell you something in those scenes that you didn't know yet in the main
Yeah.
movie. And
Well,
that's
but
that
it's-
he doesn't have the strength to finish off the cancer, you know.
Yeah, on that part, I can see your point there. I agree. But you see what I mean for most of it. It's like we're essentially seeing a lot of the same points over and over again. And the
Right,
problem,
yeah, it's
and
just
and
it's
the and the
an
problem,
allegory for the whole
Well,
thing that's
and
going on in the main
that's what
scene.
that's what I mean is that I think it would be something that'd be more interesting to
The-
read than it would be to watch. And then the problem is it's hard to maintain the dramatic tension because for half the movie you know that what you're seeing isn't real, and so therefore the stakes aren't really there. All you're
The-
doing is go ahead.
The way that I look at the swan scene is the whole thing where his sister has a hard time dealing with his disease, and
Let her come
I
to
think
you.
the whole thing with "Let Her Come to You" was being patient and letting her come to you, and I love that scene where he's waiting patiently, and he gets to touch the swan. I mean, that's a beautiful scene.
And he builds that whole that false swan hat, and I
Out
love
of-
that scene as well, dude.
out
Not only
of-
that,
out of
because
all
it's got
the-
his mom who is smoking hot. Like, I was hoping they'd get divorced so I could become his new stepdad. But fucking, it's just such an awesome part of the movie, man. And
out of all
I
the
think it touches
movies-
on the "Let Her Come to You" thing, but it also is kind of him working through the fact that you gotta, even though you're sick, learn to be excited about the people in your life that have other things going on too, because you're not going to have infinite amount of times to experience this,
Yeah.
So your
Well,
sister's Swan Lake thing is like actually important,
And out of all the fantasy sequences, I will say that one was probably executed the best because it took something that we saw in the real world and it did tell us some of what we already knew, but it did expound upon it a little bit more. Because the whole one of the theories of dreams as in the kind that you have when you fall asleep, not fantasies, not writer, daydreams or imaginations or anything, but like the dreams that you have when you're asleep. One of the theories of dreaming is that it's your subconscious's attempts to try to solve some problems and things that were on your mind when you were awake.
Yeah.
This kind of has that feel to it, so it feels like it's his brain trying to rationalize and work out the problem. Like that's great. I think that some more of that I think might have been warranted as far as like if you structured these dream sequences to where it's clearly like him trying to figure out the problem. In a little bit.
Well, what you got to
more,
understand with
yeah.
B movies and like TV movies is lots of times these filmmakers are thrown out on the spot and they're like, do it. You got this many days. We'll see you when
Yeah.
it's done. So some of the smarter ideas come in the later acts of the movies because they're shooting almost in sequence, and that's when they thought of them,
Well,
But if
and
you're a
they
good-
did
make
get
it-
smarter with they did fully like obviously get smarter with the fantasy sequences later
well,
in
and
the
the
movie.
third
Yeah.
and the third fantasy thing is more to deal with his father and the honesty that maybe his father is not dealing with this whole idea that he's just trying to paint everything in a pretty picture and not deal with the problem at hand, and not accept that his son may actually lose this battle. And
Well, real shit, dude.
I-
There's a lot of things he could take from me, but my kid is like the only thing that I really probably give like a total fuck about in the world. And I sympathize
hope
with this
so.
dad a lot in some ways, where it's like, dude, I'd probably be lying to myself through 2/3 of it too,
Yeah.
thinking that if I built a house, she would get better just so she could plan her bedroom or something, So that shit really kind of broke my heart in the movie, in that scene where they finally have like the heart to heart, where he's like, you seem mad all, I'm sure we'll get to that, but that part fucked me up, dude, because it was like I could see myself being that dad in a lot of ways, where I'm just trying to like do positive
And
things to
the
make
black-
sure the kid has the best time in the world, before whatever happens.
And the black. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and if something on this exact note was said along the way, apologize for coming back around to it. But I thought it was something you just said, Dave, just triggered a thought in my head of one of the recent individuals who died from cancer with Norm Macdonald. And I'm pretty sure he was the one that I read this quote in reference to. And I'm paraphrasing. But it's something like you're talking about how they always talk about people losing a battle with cancer. Like, they had this long battle and ultimately they lost. And then he's like, well, the cancer dies the same time you do. So really, it's more like a draw. So,
yeah,
Yes.
and technically, no matter what illness you do or don't have, everybody loses at the end because we all die. So it doesn't matter what kills you; it's just when.
Well, and to this day, cancer is something that you cannot always entirely come back from. I mean, it's always like a 50-50 chance of you surviving. So those who have, kudos to them, and those who haven't, you just got to remember them for who they were.
And you could say in a situation like this, where part of the battle is creating a story, even if it may have not been a work of art in the sense that some people would think of it. Still, you got a nice creative story.
I think
specifically as a tool is what I'm as a weapon against the cancer. He could almost say that maybe he came out slightly ahead.
I think I forgot. I think I forgot to say something about why I feel like this movie really speaks to me, is because my mom actually had a tumor on her brain that was the size of a golf ball, called an acoustic neuroma, back when I was 11 years old, and she could have died from this, and it was a rough thing to go through. But and they told my mom that her face and everything should hang. Well, it didn't. It's just nerves on her left side. She lost her hearing.
Yep.
And
I think my mom had the same thing, dude. They had to cut up under her face to get it out of her fucking skull and shit.
Well, they went through the back of her head to get to this one, but thankfully they were able to retrieve it. But by the time she lost most of her feeling in the left side of her face, and she's just had to deal with it, And I think that's kind of why I feel emboldened to this film, because I've seen someone go through something similar.
Yeah.
Oh, dude. I mean, it definitely touched home for me, because I lost 2 relatives in just the last year to cancer. Thankfully, only one of which was really prominent in my life and shit. But it's a fucked up thing to watch somebody like that. I mean, my uncle was like a bodybuilder, and a prolific airbrush artist. I think that's what gave him cancer, honestly. Because he'd always be spray painting fucking Conan fan art and some Airstream with no ventilation.
When
and then
you
he'd
see
just make you watch heavy metal with him and pound beers. It was fucking awesome.
When you see your mother look like the withered lover from the 13th Ghost, that's
that's what I'm saying.
Behold.
This dude weighed 80 pounds last time I saw him, which was nuts, and I could not go again.
I can
man, cancer is fucked up.
I can see,
and
why
you can be the strongest person in the world and not beat it, and you can be some wimpy kid and beat it. There's no rhyme or reason to whose body holds up the best to that shit. If anybody would have beat it, I thought it'd been my uncle, because that dude was peak athletic. He looked like a fucking Frank Frazetta painting. you know. But that
shoot,
dude got
I,
cancer in his leg and fucking died from it. Yeah.
I mean, shoot, my father just died this summer. Cancer was the main reason why he went downhill so much. And though the cancer itself didn't kill him, all the
Yeah,
complications
it's like it
from the
weakens you.
treatment
Yeah.
is what really did him in. And much like
So you can
this
beat
kid's
cancer and
story,
like die a year later because you got sick, you know.
that's the thing. I mean, it's
Sorry,
just
I
like
didn't
the
mean to
story.
interrupt you,
One
dude.
complication after another, and they get weaker and weaker until they die.
Yep.
Um,
My uncle hit
see
that
why-
point just like
yeah.
this kid where he was like, you know what? I'm not doing treatment anymore because
Yeah.
it just makes me sick all the time. I probably got like a year left to live. I'm just gonna hang out with all you guys and like be around. And then when I start getting too sick for that, I'll just die. And that's exactly what he did. I couldn't go around
Mhm.
his house like at the end because I wasn't trying to watch him die.
No.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I can see why this would strike a chord. I think with people that might have gone through something like that, or seen a loved one go through it. And again, what the end product as it exists here is done respectfully, and it's executed well enough as a movie of its type and of its
Yeah.
period to where it
As a
would.
TV
I can
movie,
see-
it's a B plus,
Yeah.
maybe an A minus. You know, like it's
Something
fucking
like
good.
Well, it's got a 7.1 rating on IMDb, which is actually pretty good.
Yeah, that seems
Yeah.
about right. That seems about where I would place it.
From the
Um,
few hundred of us that have actually seen it, you know, I mean, I feel like that's a fair approximation of what it deserves.
What's
You know,
what's there is definitely solid, especially relative to its time and its medium.
yeah, getting
I
down to
just-
the
I-
nitty gritty. I've seen better TV movies for sure.
Yeah,
You
but I've
know, that
also
were
seen
even
a
done in the
whole
same
lot
vein.
worse.
But exactly, I've seen
Yeah.
some stinkers.
Well, and then my larger point is I do think this story has enough continued relevance and continued appeal that I think
Well-
that you probably could do a full feature film.
Yeah, fuck it.
And
Give me the
the-
art house
uh,
butt walker
and
version of it. I'll watch
The
it.
courage,
Why
wisdom,
not?
honesty, and what is it? Strength are the model that the Four Diamond Spuns uses in their speech, in their About Me section. So it continues as a legacy from Chris Millard.
Mhm.
So, but I do like how on the end of this film, you see the family members and the friends and the doctors and nurses all reading the story, like they're reading his journey, and they are living it as they're reading it aloud.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's the joy of him having written it down in real life, is that it does or any work of art from anybody, whatever they have going on in their lives, it's something, they create something greater than themselves that allows them, a part of them, to live on.
I think we've
And then it
talked
ends
about
with the
production
classic
a
like
lot.
inspirational movie ending where it's like some old dude narrating that you don't see, and he's like, and then one day he died of fucking cancer. You know, and I was expecting halfway to see the text pop up on the screen for other characters, like he went on to form a record distribution company or something.
Well, you see, what you don't know is they all died of cancer. You just
Man.
Well, I think we've talked
everybody
about.
dies at the end.
I think we've talked about production all throughout the film,
Yeah,
so I think
yeah.
we can get past that hurdle. What do we think about the music in the film?
Honestly,
I
didn't even
don't
notice it.
remember it. Me either.
Standard TV movie, Hallmark
Didn't
movie
really-
fare.
Yeah, I didn't think.
They had room.
I
for
barely
improvement,
noticed.
that's for sure.
Okay. Moving on to favorite scenes. If y'all could choose a favorite scene, what would it be? Brandon, I'll start with you.
Shoot.
I kind of like that scene where he goes and starts the chemo, and is introduced to that one kid who was he was there as his friend really, and they're hitting the TV trying to get the game on. I kind of like that. I thought that was kind of cool.
Well, and it adds a cool element in that, like, he's kind of a shithead to him as his cancer gets worse, or the chemo gets worse. And he's being like a dick to him towards the end there. And that Tony kid starts to kind of take notice of it, because when they're first saying goodbye, he's like, yeah, whatever, man. Like, I already been in here twice, and you're going home, and I was trying to be nice to you, and you're being a little bitch. And then they trade, like, baseball caps. And then later there's that scene where Tony comes to visit him. And the kid asks
kind
him
of a
about
development
it.
there.
Yeah, he says, like, well, your parents did ask me, but I also wanted to come, so both, you know.
Which
So
I almost kind of wonder if it was his parents who actually, like, pretty much begged him to come over. But he was
you gotta
just nice
wonder
enough to
about
say that that it was both, just to be, you know.
You gotta wonder, because he was a bit of a dick to him towards the end there, and then all of a sudden when he's going home, he wants to be friendly again, and the dude was kind of like, ugh.
Yeah.
You know.
But in any case, Roger, if there was a specific moment that you could take from the film, what would you take from it?
Actually, the scenes I like the most, it's when the kid was screaming out, "You hate me! I don't, you don't care for me." The emotional outbursts. That's what I like.
Okay. What about you, Jake? Is there a scene that you could take from this film in any way, shape, or form?
Kind of hard to say what would be the favorites. I like the scene at the beginning, I think mainly because I really liked that one night. I just thought he seemed like kind of cool character. Maybe that scene with the I don't know if this is particularly one that Roger was just referencing, but the scene where he basically finally unloaded on the doctor, and just her response, I just thought was excellent. I mean, again, we mentioned before that Christine Lottie had a slightly better acting overall than a lot of the characters, but I just think the way she handled that scene was really, really good. Those are probably the ones that really stuck in my mind more than anything.
Okay.
Some of the scenes with Tony too might be on there.
Okay. Well, Dane, if there was a specific moment that you could take from this film, what would it be?
I think actually I might pick the same one that Jake did, where she kind of says that she does care about him. And it's just she's not really great at showing it. I don't know, like that resonated with me. I think it's again because I sympathize with characters that have communication problems of various sorts, but they are not malicious.
Okay. What about you, Forrest? Are you still around?
Yep, I'm still here.
What if there was a favorite moment to take from this film? What would it be?
Favorite moment in this film? You know, to be honest, I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean,
you don't have to have a favorite moment if you don't want to.
Right.
But in any case, Mo, if you could take a favorite scene from this film, what would you say?
Well, any scene with his mom, because, like I said, I'm definitely stepdad material. If you get tired of that, hit me up.
I say I like to go on the babysitter's
Man, you have some MILF issues.
Hey. Self-professed.
You say that like it's a bad thing.
Bro. Sign me up.
Somebody, if it was There are certain people. It's like if they had kids, it's like that wouldn't slow me down. You know.
That chick's still hot, and she's like old now, and I'd still be like, yeah, you know, want me to come mow your lawn? There's so many scenes in the movie though that I do like towards the end when they start realizing that this is not something he's just going to get over. You know, I especially am a fan of the whole scene where he's battling like that Dark Knight or whatever, and he's trying to fight the cancer, and then it has that whole build up to that point where he's like about to cut him down, and then it cuts to him at the dinner table all bald, and he's like, yeah, I just don't think I can, you know.
Well, believe it or not, I do believe that they did a making of, like, before the movie even came on, and like they were showing how they did that whole battle scene, which was kind of wicked. And I remember watching that. It was just like one of those promotional things, you know, where they did behind the scenes, like they did on Robin Hood, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. They did that beforehand, and then they did something with Lord of the Rings when that came out. You saw some behind the scenes before the film even came out, you know. So
they had a Terminator tape that came out that was just behind the scenes stuff. I own it. It's awesome.
In any case, I would have to say any scene with Rip Tanahan. I enjoy the lyric ness of her prose, and I enjoyed every fantasy moment in this film just as much as the reality. I would have to say the whole film on a whole. I just enjoy it.
It's great.
And it's just through and through an honest performance. So, other than that, did anyone else have anything else to add?
I don't know, man. Again, I think it's pretty criminal that this is not out there by somebody. So if anybody involved happens to listen to this, you know, get out there and get it done, at least to spread the word about that cancer foundation.
Yeah. It should at least, you know, however you feel about it, it should be there to be seen and evaluated by people, because clearly it's able to strike a chord with people. And I just I like things being able to be good, bad, up, down, whatever. I like people being able to see it, you know, for what it is.
Alrighty. So I think that's this is where we shall do our outros. So Forrest, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
All right. My name is Forrest Bennett. I'm an independent film producer based in Long Island, New York, and also movie and comic book enthusiast. And I've always got something else. I've always got something going on.
Okay. Going over to you, Roger. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Oh, my name is Roger. I run Animazing Collections Company, a small Facebook group that specializes in large-scale anime, manga, and figure collecting. I particularly like my Super Grand Grid Array, and I hope one day to have the biggest collection in Florida, if not in the States.
All righty. Heading over to you, Dane. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Dane Kyle, independent filmmaker out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and host of an upcoming web series that I've been working on for a few months called Oztober, where I review a different Oz-related film or TV adaptation every day in October. So stay tuned for that. It's coming up soon.
All righty. Going over to you, Mo. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, my name is Mosley. I run a channel called Drunken Master Studios, and I think it's fair to say at this point I am the, you know, most prominent coverage of full moon features on the internet. So if you guys want to come over and see a bunch of reviews and a bunch of cool stuff that's going to be unveiled in the coming weeks, get on over there. We also got an event going on called the Full Moon Fan Fest, where you can submit a video, you know, talking about your favorite full moon movie. And if you feel motivated enough, you can also do, you know, your most wanted full moon item in your collection, like what you'd like to add to it. And yeah, just send the videos to me on my Full Moon Madness Facebook page. Put them up on YouTube unlisted. I'll just steal them from there, and hope to see a lot of you guys out there.
Alrighty. Going over to you, Brandon. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, Septum Sen is Septum Sen versus the world. We love physical media and everything to do with it. We have the Versus Awards, which is coming up next week, next Thursday, the 30th of September. We have an advertisement out. Of course, if you catch it, share it around. I'd love to see people know. We've gotten most of the presentations done. I'm hoping to maybe to record just a little bit more tonight, matter of fact. And hopefully by Monday, the whole show will be done, put together, and we'll have it as a premiere. We'll all be, well, most of us should be there. So you should join us as we premiere our first, kind of more universal award ceremony to the internet. So I hope you all join us there. And don't forget to join us next time on Inside Movies Galore, because Forrest's birthday is next week. Well, technically it's this week, but next week we're going to... Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Well, we'll celebrate the birthday next week as we talk about Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2.
All right. Double A
Big
movie.
old call.
And going over to you, Jake, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, my name's Jake. I also live here in Central Virginia, where I am co-host on Septum Sen versus the World. And, well, he already covered most of the highlights. We also do have our anime discussions. I don't recall if you said that, but that'll be up next week, I think.
The Chris Chan discussion we did this week.
Yes, well, there's that as well. But we'll have our anime anti-comics talking about Those Who Hunt Elves, a real classic of anime-ness there. I, too, am a big... what's that?
I said, indeed. Ty Brown.
I, too, am a big collector / fan of all this kind of stuff, and I try to find time in between working 2 jobs and trying to start a business, and also all the other stuff that goes with adulting, which, as we mentioned, is kind of a double-edged sword for many of us, but we do it and we enjoy it.
And
we all eventually die.
And my name is David Streggy. I'm one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore. So thank you for taking the journey of the 4 diamonds with me, gentlemen. It is a film near and dear to my heart, and probably the most human that I have showed most of you. So thank you. I appreciate it. And it kind of surprised me that we went this long. But in any case, journeying forward, I do moonlight under a different channel called Delusions of Grandeur. Check that channel out. I go on about my video pickups and some of my thoughts on films when I can get my thoughts out on them. Recently, I put out a review of Jacker and Jacker 2. Check those out. And I have a filmed video pickup that I have ready to just upload. So keep an eye out for that. And I think I'm looking forward to doing some ghost busting next week. So also hunting some elves and stripping them down to their bareness. Anyways.
Well, people say it makes you feel good.
In any case, ladies and gentlemen,
stripping elves makes you feel good.
It makes some people feel good.
Well, especially at a convention of some sort, you get back to the hotel room.
I can imagine Venkman would have enjoyed being part of that crew.
Regardless,
well, probably.
like, share, and subscribe, and hopefully you enjoyed our discussion on this film. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Bye.